we're going to have a discovery conversation. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting conversation because we have two volunteers who are going to really open up the conversation for us. And we're going to talk about gender and sexuality and trans issues and LGBT issues, queer issues, and non-binary issues. And what we're going to do, we're just going to walk into what this is. And none of the rhetoric, none of how are we supposed to say it, how are we supposed to think about it. I'm going to walk you through the way I see these issues. And I don't buy the rhetoric, but I'm going to give you the sociology of it so we can understand what it is that we're really talking about. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'll go first. My name's Alex. I'm a senior and I'm studying computer engineering. And I guess for the purposes of this class, I'm gay, so that's important too.
Hi, my name is Corey. I am a freshman in studying in animal science, and again, for this class, I am genderqueer and pansexual.
So there are a lot of adults, people who are saying like, hey, I don't want my children to go to school and be schooled on and get lessons on their sexuality, especially at a really young age. And I don't want my children going to schools and getting inundated with other people's thoughts about race and culture. And I was thinking about that for myself, and I said, if I had kids, who would I want teaching about sex, sexuality, and race? And I was thinking, I'd want me. Like if my kids went off to schools and I have an idea of what some of the lessons are and some of the stuff that's being taught and what other people are thinking, what people are thinking about race, the common narrative about race in the United States, and that's happening in schools, and that if you grew up in the United States, it's the narrative that you received and are inundated by, and you memorize about how you have to think about white people and black people and brown people and minorities and whatever it is. And I mostly disagree with that narrative. And I wouldn't want my kid to be pressured into swallowing that narrative from like kindergarten on. And when I think about sexuality and all of the issues, the complex issues related to sexuality, I wouldn't want my kid to be having conversations in the second, third, fourth grade, primary school about these issues with people who I'm sure if I were sitting and listening to them would have good intentions, but I'm sure I would disagree with them, the way they talk about it, and the way people are force-fed to have to accept the vision that is kind of like this dominant vision, like trans issues, and how easy it is, how you just have to be supportive of trans issues, and anything that even questions trans in the dominant narrative becomes transphobic. And I think of all the ways in which I am identified or would be identified as transphobic, as heterosexist, as racist, like all these things, because I don't buy the party line. I don't buy the standard perspective. And so when I think about protecting the kids, and I think about all these parents out there that are saying, listen, we don't want our kids learning this stuff in second and third and fourth grade. We don't want them like having to choose their pronouns when they're 7 years old. Yeah, why are kids choosing their pronouns at 7 years old? Like, what the man? What is this, right? And so the idea is like, it's like it's just like a fast moving, like river of ideas, like a flood of ideas, and you just can't get out of it. And everybody just goes along, and everyone's afraid to stand up unless you're in a red state. But if you're in a blue state or a blue school, like Penn State mostly is, everyone's afraid to stand up and say, wait a minute, I got a real problem here, especially if you're white or if you're straight, of which I am both, or a man, of which I am all three. But I'm comfortable saying, like, no, I don't buy that, because I can turn the issues around in a lot of different directions, but many other people are not. So protecting the kids, I get why so many people are standing up to all of these conversations that we're having about, like, critical race theory and gender teachings and getting kids to practice their pronouns when they're in grade school and stuff. Like, I'm just not sure that that's the business. A lot of that stuff is the business of schools. You know, books by Rosa Parks or whatever it is, that's a different story. But, like, whatever. I'm just not sure that that's the issue. So what I want to say is, we're going to have a conversation about this today. And I'm going to walk through what the issues are. And we are going to walk through what the issues are. And we're going to walk through at what I think is going to be a really very thoughtful and honest and open way, where we're just going to dig into what we're actually talking about. And none of the rhetoric, none of the how are we supposed to say it, how are we supposed to think about it. I'm going to walk you through the way I see these issues. And I don't buy the rhetoric, but I'm going to give you the sociology of it so we can understand what it is that we're really talking about. There are three dimensions that we are going to talk about, and there are three primary dimensions. The first is gender. And gender is largely sociological and to a degree psychological. Gender is, you kind of have the masculine, you have the feminine, you have everything in between, but you have the masculine, you have the feminine. We're going to just make this binary for a second, okay? And then you decide, like, we as societies, as cultures, decide what represents the masculine, what represents it, right? The way people talk, the way they style their hair, the way they use or don't use makeup, the clothing they wear, all of these things, right? The jobs people have, etc. Sociologically speaking, we make agreements about what is masculine gender and what is feminine gender, okay? And then all the stuff in between where it gets really complicated. So gender is the first one. This is largely how we present ourselves to the world, how we think about ourselves in just these ways. Because why? Because our bodies are different. And so sociologically speaking, we have to somehow manage the fact that our bodies are different. Okay, so the second piece is sexual orientation. And we have this thing in society, it's sex. Sex is part of life. It's how we all got here, and we're all managing it, especially folks of your age. When you get to my age, you manage it, but in a slightly different way. But you all are managing this in a really serious way. Sex is part of life. And so the question is like, whoa, okay, there's a biological component to sex, meaning like who my body is naturally drawn to. And then there's a psychological component to sex. Who are my eyes drawn to? Who's my mind drawn to? Like, who's like, these pieces, right? So sex can be the choice piece, right? Oh, this would be really interesting. I think it'd be really nice to have sex with that person. Well, wait, what's that person? Is this a man or is it a woman? Is this someone who identifies gender as masculine? Is their gender masculine or is their gender feminine? Like, who is this? And so we talk about sexual orientation. I have an orientation toward people like this, who are masculine, or toward men, or I have an orientation toward the feminine and women, who have bodies that we identify as women's bodies, okay? And understand, there are bodies that have both of the sexual organ, the composition of man and woman, but we're going to set that aside for a second. And then we have sex. We have these are our bodies. What's our sex? Like, I'm a man. Like, I was born a man. I don't have any biological genetic characteristics of what we identify as women's characteristics, okay? So, and that's what most men would be. or I could be a woman, but I'm born a man. I can do things with my body to move me more toward being a woman. But the point is, but I haven't done that. And so I identify as a man. And this is about our biology and our genetics, and same with being a woman, okay? So we got the three things. We have gender, sexual orientation, and then we have sex. Okay, cool? And we're going to walk through what the complexities of these things. It's actually really simple, but it's complex. And because it's simple and complex, we get many people who just are very clear about this is the word you should use, and this is how you should see it. And I'm like, no, there are no shoulds in any of this. Like, leave the shoulds on the other side of the door. What we should do, except the only should be, is just exploration and conversation, so that we understand there's 1,000 ways that you can talk about this stuff.